What was your let's not meet again moment? Just yesterday, I went to a friend's house for a small get-together at another buddy's place. It went great, we laughed a lot, had fun, and left around 9 p.m. I had ridden my bike there from home, but when it was time to leave, I realized my phone was dead. No GPS, no flashlight. Just me and my bike in the dark. I started zigzagging through unfamiliar streets, trying to find my way home. At one point, I stopped at a crosswalk to catch my breath. That's when I noticed someone behind a tree wearing a blue hoodie. He raised his arm and waved at me. It was weird, I didn't wave back. I just got on my bike and kept moving. A few streets down, I suddenly heard heavy breathing and fast footsteps behind me. I turned around and it was the guy in the blue hoodie, a white male, running straight at me. I pedaled like hell. As I was speeding away, I heard him yell, "Fuck you!" I made it to a BBQ restaurant, hoping to duck inside, but it was already closed. I looked back. He was still following me. I kept pedaling, heart pounding, until I reached the AutoZone near my house. When I finally glanced behind me again, he was gone. For a second, I thought it was over until I heard a voice near the front of AutoZone. A male voice laughing maniacally. The laugh faded into the distance, like he was walking away. I booked it home, locked everything, and tried to sleep, but paranoia kept me awake. So, to the guy in the blue hoodie with the crazy laugh, let's never meet again. I was seeing a fake psychologist for years. For some context, I had a really shitty childhood. It was terrible. Where I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened through those years was from a mixture of sparse memories, things my family have told me about myself and police reports. One of those things I do remember, however, is this lady I called Auntie. No first name, no last name, nothing else contributing to her identity. She was just Auntie. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old, sitting in her living room as she typed everything I said down on her laptop. I had no problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought that she was someone I could trust. So I did. 7 years later, 14 years old, I admitted to her that I tried to kill myself numerous times. It was a mixture of multiple different factors: my mother's increasing toxicity, the lack of social interaction at the time, and more importantly, I never moved on from the horrors in my childhood. Now, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially to do with the fact that I begged her to tell me why I constantly wanted to die. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get the chance to see a different person. Maybe get a different sort of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my auntie. Auntie, at the end of these sessions, would try to defend my mother, or make me seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time on why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic. Maybe being able to explain why my mother was terrible was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way. And then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Auntie started to ask very specific questions, especially to the topics mentioned above. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things must be from the fact that at this point, she's known me for almost a decade, all the way into a year later. She started to bring up the parties I've gone to in these sessions without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of all, something that still affects me till this day. At the end of each session, Auntie had started to invite Mai into the room and tell her every single thing I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse that she has begun to put me through, said straight to her face as she sat next to me. My grades in school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. So I tried to kill myself on my 17th birthday. I ran into my mother's room looking for something that I could overdose with, or just something that could push me to the edge. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I had barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she even had one of these. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a shit ton of papers. The surprise of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in. And I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor and wondering what the fuck these papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Auntie and I's sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I did. I remember feeling sick, feeling so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions. And I decided that night that I would kill myself after what I figured out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed, because I really only had a year left to figure out what the hell was going on before I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention in our sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance to, looking for some indicators that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about Auntie, and she kept deflecting, repeating the same fact: she was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but then it was really life or death. My mother was in the shower, and I had already packed all the stuff I needed to be out for a few hours. Maybe even for a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out the house. I didn't even look down at the damn thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name, even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place. But even as I walked off the bus and years of texts were read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they call extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages, which was smart. I'll give credit where credit is due, but it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit at on the side of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching up Auntie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave me body then. And sometimes now I swear I can still feel the same sick feeling as I felt then. I almost gave up, almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers, because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name, some weird fake one. But when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends. And I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of herself and my mother. Years ago. They have literally been friends even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what the hell was going on. Why my mother had transcripts. Why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said. Why she defended her. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beat black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night is, "Who is Auntie really?" And she couldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him. Since we applied to the same university, he's one of my best friends now, El Mao. What finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way, clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all. When I searched up the username in the search bar, and when it came up with Auntie's Facebook account. This psycho had been following me for God knows how long on my Instagram. And suddenly everything that didn't click finally made sense. The sudden precise questions, why my mother suddenly decided to isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her fucking bio. Tell me why it said chemistry teacher with over 20 years, FML. I admit that I cried like a baby that night, because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything in my childhood. Instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university, it sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wished I knew that sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist trust. I did my research, I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I'm sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do, LOL. I decided to post about my experience just in the slight chance anyone had a similar experience, with therapy becoming fucked up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys it gets better, with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again. The deputy told me it was probably just some drunk guy. I lived pretty far out in the country, just me and my dog, no close neighbors. The light came on, and there he was, same spot, same stillness. And they sent someone to check it out. But by the time they got there, just standing there facing my house, I don't know why, but I froze. Just standing there, staring at the house. By this point, I woke up in the middle of This went on for about a week. Every night like clockwork. I was starting to get really freaked out. I called the sheriff's department. The light went off after a while and everything went back to passing through. Quiet. I don't know why I'm posting it here now, but it's been on my mind again. Staring at my house. At first I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or something. And I just need to get it out. At the time, this happened a few years ago and I've never told anyone about it. It just ended. I've never told anyone this before. It's probably not a big deal staring at him and he didn't move at all. And that I shouldn't worry unless he started coming closer. I saw a man standing at the end of my driveway and it was usually really quiet. I liked it that way. I'd wake up and see him standing there at the end of the driveway. But it's something that stuck with me. I just needed to write it down. But when I looked out the window, night to the motion sensor light going off outside. I didn't sleep much after that. The next night it happened again. It got to the point where I started closing the blinds at night. It stopped. I never saw him again. It was always the same. He never moved. No explanation. Never said anything. That didn't make me feel better, but I tried to move on. There was a man who stood at the end of my driveway every night. But I still felt like I could feel him out there. And then, just like that, he was already gone. Nearly mugged at 4 a.m. by a dude on a kid's pink bike while trying to get McNuggets. Right. So picture this, it's about 4 in the morning. One of those cold, Damp London weekdays where the air feels heavy and clings to you. I'd fallen down a video game rabbit hole surfaced hours later and realized two things. One, it was obscenely late. Two, I'd completely forgotten to eat dinner. A quick, desperate scan of the kitchen confirmed the worst nothing. Damn it! My only hope was the 24-hour McDonald's down the road. It's maybe a 10-minute walk, mostly through quiet suburban streets that feel almost unnervingly still at that hour. Coat on, I headed out into the pre-dawn gloom. Habit took over, and I immediately stuck my earphones in, scrolling through my phone to catch up on the messages and notifications I'd blissfully ignored for the past several hours. In hindsight, I know exactly how that looks headphones in, face lit by a phone screen, completely oblivious to the world at 4 a.m. Prime target material, basically. I was about halfway there when I registered movement just behind me. I glanced back. There was a guy swallowed by an oversized hoodie, riding a bicycle, except it wasn't a normal bike. It was painfully, obviously a child's pink bicycle. The tiny frame looked ridiculous underneath him. He wasn't going anywhere specific, just doing slow, wide loops on the empty street, always ending up slightly behind me. Now, I've lived in London for about 3 years. You see weird stuff. It's part of the background noise. My default programming kicked in head down. Keep walking, don't make eye contact. He'll get bored. Standard operating procedure for navigating the city's low-level strangeness. But then he wasn't behind me anymore. He smoothly cycled up right alongside me, matching my pace. The ignore it strategy suddenly felt very thin. He was muttering something. It was clear he wanted my attention. Reluctantly, I pulled out one earbud, still walking, trying for casual indifference. My automatic defense mechanism fired off before I even properly heard him. I'm sorry. I don't have any change. That's when I made the mistake of actually looking at him. He wasn't asking for change. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was a hard, focused intensity there that immediately set off alarm bells. My gaze flickered down. His right hand was shoved deep into the front pocket of his hoodie, pushing the fabric outwards. Oh, it wasn't a slow dawning realization. More like a sudden plunge into ice water. The casual weirdness evaporated, replaced by cold, sharp-edged fear. That's when I properly registered his words. Spoken low but clear. "Give me your phone." My feet kept moving, seemingly on autopilot, but the rest of me felt frozen. My brain felt like it was buffering, trying to process the demand against the very real possibility of what was in that pocket. Is he bluffing? Is that a knife? Is this phone I literally just got and definitely can't afford to replace worth getting stabbed over? The mental calculus was frantic and terrifying. We were still moving forward, side by side in this bizarre, terrifying mobile standoff. Me staring straight ahead, hyper-aware of him beside me, my mind racing. And then a sound. The distinct rumble of a car engine growing louder. Headlights swept across the end of the street, illuminating the junction just yards ahead. A brief moment of blinding light. I shot a look back at the guy on the tiny pink bike. The thought flashed, run! Make a break for the car. For the light. But before the thought could even translate into action, he abruptly swerved. He pushed off hard on the tiny pedals, cycling rapidly away down the street, disappearing back into the shadows as quickly as he'd appeared. I stood there for a second, heart hammering against my ribs. Then the next thought hit me, shit, I still have to walk home. Needless to say, the McDonald's craving vanished instantly. On the way back, the headphones stayed off and my phone stayed deep in my pocket. Clutched in my hand, I also gave the quiet suburban streets a wide berth. Instead, I took the long way round, sticking to the main A road. It's noisy, choked with fumes even at this hour, and the pavement is basically a narrow, neglected strip inches from speeding traffic. It felt horrible, but infinitely safer. The constant stream of headlights, the drone of engines, it was unpleasant, but it was presence, company of a sort. Thankfully, the rest of the walk was uneventful. No more unexpected cyclists emerged from the dark. But yeah, guy on a tiny pink bike, 4 a.m. demanding my phone. Let's definitely not meet again. Almost got myself and a friend of mine kidnapped. Hey, let's not meet. I came across this community just today and remembered something that happened to me and two of my friends almost 20 years ago. So the memories are a little blurry. The three of us were at the ripe age of 5 to 6, and we were already pretty good friends since our older sisters went to the same class. So we were pretty excited to join in on their school's field trip to Transylvania for a couple of days. We visited numerous museums and other cultural and historical sites. On one of those days, we visited the ruins of a historical castle, which was beside a village on a smaller mountain surrounded by forests and roads leading to bigger towns. Ruins like this are all over Transylvania. So it didn't have much infrastructure except for a parking lot and the roads connected to it. After the mandatory inspection of the ruin, the teachers allowed the class and us three bozos to have an hour of free time for playing on the note not to go too far. We played hide and seek with the older kids of my sister's class. Both my friends and myself had a beef with our older sisters. And we taught this would be an opportunity like no other to show them who the superior beings are in our families. So when it was our turn to hide, we came up with the plan to ignore our teacher's words and hide somewhere they would never find us. We started to run towards the ruins of the castle and hid at the parking lot behind it. It was a little further away than we were allowed to go from the place, where our Tekahairs and my sister's class was, and definitely out of sight. Our plan was to scare the shit out of our sisters, and only come out victoriously when they have had multiple panic attacks. There were only a handful of cars and only a person or two except for us. The game started a while ago, and we were hiding behind a car when an older man around 40 approached us. He had a mustache, a beer belly, and was around 5'7" tall. It was obvious that he listened to us talk and giggle about what a great hiding spot we found. With a smile, he suggested that we should hide in the back of his car and pointed at an old and rather trashy car. Now, this is the moment where any kid with a basic set of survival instincts would run back to the teachers and tell everything, but not me and one of my friends. The guy even suggested that he would cover us with a couple of blankets once we hide in the back seat. I was so excited about beating my sister in a silly game that I didn't even realize how creepy that sounds. So I said okay with the mentioned similarly excited friend of mine. Lucky for us, the third kid in our friend group still had his sanity, so politely refused and suggested that we should get back to the teachers. The guy tried to convince us a couple of times, but I guess he didn't want to risk being more aggressive with a whole class and teachers in the nearby, so we could leave and walk back to the others, disappointed and confused why our friend was such a buzzkill. We didn't talk about what happened to our teachers nor to anyone after, because despite how weird it was, we couldn't tell for sure if the stranger was actually a bad guy. Looking back, it was definitely a bad call, but we weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. I'm not entirely sure if the guy really wanted to do something horrible to us, or he was just being friendly, but looking back, it was definitely creepy. Long story short, don't get into strangers' cars, no matter how much it would piss off your sister. And to the stranger who wanted 3 kids in the back seat of his car, let's never meet again.